Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Which Cloud Platform is Right for You? This should be a fantastic conversation. We got some heavy hitters on this expert panel, so thank you to our panel for joining us. I'm Joel Anderson, the VP of Marketing here at Tier4. I look forward to presenting today's session with our founder and chairman, Jake Sherrill. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available for replay after the webinar and will be distributed along with the contact information of our panel and Tier 4 team members. Second, if you would like to participate during today's conversation, we would love to be able to hear from you. If you have a question, there's a Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask a question to our panel or to Jake, and we will cycle that into the topic of conversation today. So with that said, Jake, I will turn the time over to you and the rest of our panel.
Thank you, Joel. Looks like we got quite a few participants, a few dozen participants, as a matter of fact, joining from around the world. So we are excited to have this conversation. This is our 12th webinar that we've done here at Tier 4 Advisors since what we are classifying as the beginning of what we understand COVID to be here in North America. And so we've been blessed to speak about a lot of different topics. Today's title is Which Cloud is Right for You? Public Hyperscaler, Hyper-Converged Cloud, Virtual Public, Virtual Private, Dedicated Private. So if you already know the answer to that, maybe you can be a panelist on the next time we do a webinar like this. But we've got some subject matter experts on today's panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. And Brooks Snow, CIO at Lume, we're going to start with you. Go ahead, Brooks. Introduce yourself and your company, please.
Yeah, I'm the CTO over at Lume Technologies, really in charge of the go-to-market strategy, where the marketing and the technology meet and solution.
Uh-oh, we got a freeze right out of the gate here. Brooks, are you there?
Call with me, and we offer private clouds, dedicated private clouds, public cloud management, integration between those two, and many, many services between, which we'll get to later on in the webinar. Thanks, Jake.
Good deal. Sorry about the CIO. You're the CTO. My bad.
Jake, I'm telling you, you do this again, and this is the last time I'd be here, huh? I'm just kidding.
That's
no
fine.
big deal.
Joel, you can take a note of that. We'll mute Brooks from now on. Thomas, CEO at Greenhouse Data. Hopefully I got that one right. Thomas, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Thomas Burns, CTO, co-founder of Greenhouse Data. We are a digital innovation services company, so focus on managed services around infrastructure, application development, and essentially Microsoft consulting. I'm out of Denver, Colorado, working out of my home, as you could probably tell. 2 kids, 9 and 11, and a wife, all here in the house together at the same time.
Good deal. Your internet didn't freeze up, so they're probably not streaming too much at the moment. That's good news.
Right.
Paul, the channel CTO at Rackspace. Paul, please introduce yourself.
Howdy, everyone. Thanks for attending. Paul Croteau, channel CTO at Rackspace. Rackspace is a premier provider of advanced managed services for all things cloud infrastructure, all the major cloud hyperscalers, Amazon, Azure, Google, all the major virtualization platforms. We help customers understand how the cloud fits in their business model. We then design what they need, deploy it for them, support it on day 2 while planning about day 3 down the road. Looking forward to talking to you all about the cloud and how it can help you.
And for all of our attendees worldwide, Paul is not using a digital background. That is, in fact, all real.
That is all my stuff.
In his home office. So he is the one-man band on the panel today.
Truth.
Alvaro, pleasure to have you on board here today. Your title is AVP, Partnership and Enablement at Tierpoint. Hopefully you don't have to say that very often. But go ahead and introduce yourself and your company.
Yeah. So I'm Alvaro, really happy to be here with you, with all of these guys. Tierpoint is a data center, cloud, and services company operating 42 data centers around the nation in 20 cities and working with our customers for strategy going in and for results coming out. So excited to talk with you. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. And for full disclosure, I either sit on the advisory board or probably would be on the advisory board for all 4 of these companies, for those who don't have advisory boards. But I have an opportunity to personally speak with you as attendees today, as someone who fully understands not only what all these vendors do best, but also from a position of Tier 4 advisors. I founded this business 7 years ago, really on the premise that IT professionals have better things to do with their time than go out and publish RFPs and deal with the vendor back and forth with regards to procuring new services. So over the last 7.5 years, we have developed a database, worldwide database of over 700 vendors, and we help you with data center, telecom, managed services, security, and emerging tech type projects. So feel free to look us up at tier4advisors.com if you're interested. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alvaro, we're going to throw you this one first. Let's talk about the definition of what is cloud and kind of get into the meat of it, if you will. For those who are joining, a lot of people already understand what cloud is, but the thing that I find interesting is 7-8 years into this cloud thing that we're calling, digital transformation for a lot of clients. Still today, if you were to ask 100 different IT professionals what cloud is, you'd still probably get 101 different answers. So let's talk about that, and we'll have kind of a little bit of a round robin discussion. But what's the difference between public and private clouds? And overall, what is cloud in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's highly actually underrated to start with setting some definitions around things to have a good conversation. So I think cloud in general would just be virtualized resources, especially server side. So compute, storage, transport, and the software that makes it all run. Going into then kind of a continuum from public to private. Lots of people, you get the brand name sort of recognition, and people think AWS, oh, that is the cloud. It is a cloud. It is one of the clouds, but on this continuum between most public clouds and the most private clouds, there are all kinds of stops in between, right? From, if you think about the distinction essentially between the between the hyperscale clouds, like a hotel, you can have in the middle a condo or a house with an HOA, so that stuff that you don't want to deal with gets dealt with for you, all the way through to, your own house and steps along the way, right? From fully dedicated backplane in to you, most private, none of it dedicated specifically to you, most public.
That's great. And Thomas, I'll let you chime in here. As we talked on the pre-call, you have some different ideas about what cloud is as well.
Well, I think Alvaro hit it perfectly with the analogy around a hotel, and that's kind of how we look at public clouds, or generally speaking, multi-tenant, pooled resources, pooled CPU, RAM, and storage. Private clouds, single tenant, just for a single client's use. A lot of the other areas that we would kind of talk about would be scalability. Obviously, public clouds, essentially hyperscale public clouds like AWS or Azure, are they're scalable, unlimited. Where private clouds, although they are scalable, have certain limitations as far as how you can scale them. You need to add physical nodes or physical equipment to those private clouds to expand them. But just like your house analogy, you can always add an addition to a house. But it's great if you're in one of those, if you really need scalability, that you can just sort of add units as you need them.
So you're talking about, with regards to a hotel, you walk down the hallway and you rent another room. That's a little more scalable than adding on another wing to your house. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly it.
Paul, do you have anything else to add on this particular topic?
Absolutely. Those guys are both spot on. I think the biggest thing about cloud had changed the world. When Amazon opened the kimono and exposed it to the world, it changed the world largely from a deploy time perspective. Instead of taking months or weeks to order and receive boxes on your dock that had to be unboxed, racked, stacked, configured, et cetera. And now we're getting to market literally in minutes in the big hyperscalers. So for me, it's about three main things. It's scalability up and down. You can add resources quickly, and the more important thing is you can turn them off. You can't ship boxes back to HP or Dell, but you can turn off cloud compute. Then paying only for what you use. You're no longer buying for the spike and paying for the lull periods. And then the ability to automate all of that. So you can say, hey, my web servers are spiking at 90%. If 90% for greater than 10 minutes, fire up 5 more web servers. And then that happens automatically with no one touching it. And then if CPU utilization is less than 10% for 10 minutes, turn some of those off. So it's scaling up and down, paying for what you use, and then the ability to do that automatically without human intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm not a panelist, but I will chime in on my analogy that I use often for a public hyperscaler, virtual public, virtual private, dedicated private type clouds, is I use the analogy of a vending machine, right? There's a time and a place to go over and buy a drink in the vending machine. It might cost you $2.50 for a bottle of water. But if you're throwing a house party, you're not going to go buy 200 bottles of water at $2.50 a bottle, so to speak, right? And so at that point, you might go to Sam's Club or Costco in that regard. But there's also a time and a place for something in between, where it might be kind of a convenience store or a supermarket per se, where again, you can buy one or two different price in a vending machine, or you're going and buying a different pack than you might get at a large wholesale. So again, not to overcomplicate things, but there's a lot of different analogies that we all use. That's one of them that I use. With regards to what elements of a cloud platform usually attract clients, I'm amazed, even on a call that I had this morning from a client out in Utah, as a matter of fact, we were talking about different thoughts of cloud. They referenced Azure as the cloud, interestingly enough. And then I said, are we set on Azure, or are we talking about maybe some different things other than maybe just Azure? But Paul, I'll start with you. What elements of a cloud platform usually attract clients, and why?
There's always as an SC, the answer is always, it depends. It's the stock answer for SCs, but there's lots of reasons to go to market. For me, the obvious ones are speed to market, the ability to rapidly deploy somewhere. So it's quick DR, relatively quick DR solutions, burst capability, if you need to add more capacity, test and dev situations as well. So that's attractive. There are potential cost savings. However, I would like to caution the audience that the perception that cloud is always cheaper is not accurate. It can be more expensive if you're not careful. There's also a perception that it's not as secure, which is also inaccurate, because security has to do with how you configure stuff. So really, it's speed, time to deploy, and flexibility and options, compute, storage, networking, et cetera.
Great. And Thomas, anything else to add in there?
Yeah, I think those are the big hitters for sure. I think a lot of times we'll find clients that are doing lifecycle maintenance, on maintenance on hardware or their data center, and all of a sudden they're looking at all the resources, all the time, all the effort that they're in, things around vendor management, and making sure that they're squeezing that infrastructure for every single dime they can. And all of that effort around hardware lifecycle, data center lifecycle management kind of goes away when you start to move to the cloud. So all of a sudden, we are looking at all these resources that were focused on sort of these IT tasks that essentially could go away. And I think that's one of the major reasons why cloud took off over the last 10 years, is for people could essentially shutting down their private on-site data centers or data closets or whatever it might be. I also think that there is a financial perspective that cash is king, and if you can move from a CapEx model, a capital expenditure model, which is related to buying physical infrastructure and data center type of acquisitions, and move to an operational model, an OpEx model, there is a ton of value to organizations for that type of move.
Yeah. Alvaro, what else do you have as an opinion there? What are you seeing, things that attract clients to the cloud?
Yep. So I would say that, as usual, Paul and Thomas hit lots of really important things. I would say that in addition to those, though, you do have not only the cash is king dimension to think about, you have the cash is gone dimension to think about sometime too. That actually the ability to do fractional consumption in different kinds of cloud, be it hosted private, fully dedicated, all the way through hyperscale, means that you can also experiment without going to the chapel of love. You can date, for example, a new application, a new way to deliver something without having to go all in on it. It gives you, kind of a technical flexibility that also you don't get when you're having to do all of these things yourself.
And Brooks, we haven't heard from you yet, but number 3, is the cloud the right solution for everybody? Obviously, why? Obviously the answer is no, but why or why not? And how do businesses decide which cloud platform to use?
I'm glad you're asking me, Jake. I thought you were putting me in the corner for my comment earlier in the
Better watch it. Strike 2.
So obviously, no, that it's not the right solution for everybody. And really, I want to shift it from everybody to applications. I think a cloud solution is right for everyone. I think it really depends on that application and what you're trying to do. And the reason why I say that is because if you're running offline, right, you cannot necessarily use Azure Live or AWS, one of the public cloud providers. If you're disconnected, you're in a ship or whatever, but you can use their stacks or use dedicated private with decoupled from the internet. So you still get to take advantage of cloud compute concepts that Paul, Thomas, and Alvaro hit on, but it may just be more in a private on-prem style solution. So it really just depends on the application and kind of leads into, how you decide what to do and how you go about that. And honestly, I guess this sounds like a plug for you and all of us, but reaching out to someone like a Tierpoint to help do that analysis, because some of the misconceptions about these cloud solutions is that, solve all my problems, it's easy and I don't need to think about it. And I think that gets people into, Thomas and Paul hit on that financial situation. They didn't really think through the process. It doesn't take away strategy. Cloud doesn't. It doesn't take away the human element to compute. It just enables us to move faster and go faster to market, like was said before.
And I think I heard you say reach out to Tierpoint, but I think what you meant was reach out to Tier 4, unless you're referring to reach out to Alvaro directly. So,
boy, Jake, I'm really butchering this one, huh? Sorry, I was getting you back from my title mishap there. Yeah, right, I meant Tierpoint, Tier 4, yeah.
Thomas, obviously Greenhouse has a lot of different variations and opinions about this, but go ahead and share your points on this one.
I think he's absolutely right. It can come down to that workload. We have a lot of clients that have, legacy applications that are mission critical, like blue screen technologies that they're just not going to translate into the cloud very well. I think, businesses have to look at what is the effect on our clients? How can we benefit our clients with moving some aspect to the cloud, or have a long-term vision for some of those legacy applications and be able to slowly pull apart, these massive applications to move pieces of them into the cloud. You have to look at your employee base. Is your employee base, your IT folks, are they ready? Are they have the skill set to be able to focus there? Do they have strong application development skills? Are they security house? Is their infrastructure skills ready to move to that next step? Are they open source? Are they Microsoft? Those types of perspective. You need to be introspective on yourself and your organization to really determine, what platform to go to, what opportunities the cloud provide. And I think that's, really part of sort of the long-term, short-term technology vision.
And Alvaro, Paul, to add in there, what are you seeing? Obviously with Rackspace, you guys are completely agnostic. If it makes sense to go AWS, Rackspace can help there. If it makes sense to have some sort of, virtual private cloud on Rackspace metal, obviously you will recommend that. You own and operate your own data centers, all over the world. Speak to that for a second.
Sure thing. So Brooks hit on it. I've got a phrase I've been saying for years: the cloud is for everyone, but not everything. And so we're kind of experts at helping customers understand where the cloud fits in their picture. For example, if you're a retailer, you're probably getting your lunch eaten in the market space by Amazon right now because they sell everything to everyone. Why would you deploy your retail shop on their infrastructure and give your competition revenue to further compete with you? If you're a Microsoft shop with a lot of Microsoft skills internally, maybe a Microsoft Azure-based solution makes a lot more sense based on your skill set, your license relationships, etc. So there's more than just technology. The number one thing I tell my sellers in the channel is don't focus on technology first. Focus on business situations and outcomes first. That will trickle down, again, not to Brooks, to the applications, and then applications will dictate infrastructure that we all get paid on. So it's about figuring out the workloads and the need and the business scenario and where things fit.
Yeah, and 8-9 years ago when we were all starting this distributed compute journey, which is now called cloud, thanks to the folks that got their hands on it and kind of rebranded it to that term cloud. Obviously, misconceptions come with all different types of things out there, right? We all have misconceptions about maybe solar panels at our house or electric cars or whatever it might be. There's a lot of misconceptions in life. But when we talk about misconceptions of the cloud, I think oftentimes people think it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be less safe. It might be more safe. It's going to run itself. It's a set it and forget it. I mean, again, we could probably sit here for even 45 minutes of this entire webinar talking about the misconceptions we've all heard over the last 8-9 years. Brooks, I'll start with you. You're off mute. What are some of the things that you've heard, I guess, kind of rapid fire? We'll go around the entire panel. Brooks, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that it's unlimited elastic, and it just physically can't be. It's still, public cloud, private cloud, they're tied to physical assets. Now, public cloud providers have made it seemingly unlimited, but at the end of the day, you're still constrained to the CPU that the manufacturers throw out there. I'll also say that, that it's the misconception that's a little unique is that that I don't have to do anything. I mean, the public, at least related to the public cloud is a do-it-yourself solution unless you bring someone, an expert in to do that, someone like, one of these companies, one of us to do that. It needs attention. Just because it's cloud does not mean it's solved all my problems, and it's a machine that understands how I think and feel and will proactively do the things that and fix the things that humans screw up. So those are some, outside the common ones that we all know. I think those are a little unique that I'd throw out there for sure.
Thomas, you're next. Misconceptions you've heard or you've had to overcome.
Oh man, we've heard for forever, it's not secure. And the funny aspect about that is, you're right. They're right. It is not secure if you're not secure. If you're not building your architecture with security and compliance in mind, then it doesn't matter where you're deploying. If you're deploying in your garage or you're deploying in one of the biggest hyperscalers on earth, it does not matter. So, taking that the cloud deployment, regardless if that's public, private, hyperscaler, whatever it might be, is not secure is, my probably favorite misconception that we have dealt with forever, still to this day.
Paul, we'll come to you, and then Alvaro.
Jake, can I jump in and say something real quick? What Thomas said, I was real good, is that about compliance and security. Is these big public cloud providers, for example, have these wonderful merit badges of compliance that they're transferable, right? That just because they are, means your organization is, or that your organization is following those policies. I think, Thomas, I hit that all the time, is that those are not transferable. You have to, as an entity, as an organization, do the right things and prove that you are compliant. So sorry to step back in, but I thought that was really good.
No, set it and forget it. Yeah, for sure.
No, that's right.
Just want to send out a friendly reminder as well for all of our attendees. There is a Q&A aspect to this. Feel free to click. I believe it's on the bottom of your screen. If you have questions for me or any of the panelists, go ahead and start shooting those over our way. We're going to do our best to answer those towards the end. Alvaro, do you have anything else to add on that particular point?
Yeah, so, for me, maybe I'm a little bit of a contrarian about this too, but I'll briefly touch on two. One of them is that elasticity by itself is a silver bullet. They're like, well, I'm going to take it there because it scales up and it scales down infinitely. I'm like, phenomenal. When's the last time your ERP scaled up or scaled down, right? That's one of the things that actually people sometimes get attracted to the wrong thing. And they think that's cool that it's scalable. infinitely, immediately, scalable, is that the problem that you have to begin with? Maybe not. And I'd say that the other one is that there's only one cloud. People also are like, well, I mean, if I'm in, I'm in. That there's some kind of, it's polygamy to have a multi-cloud strategy, and people can be superstitious about that. There are good reasons to concentrate, but at the same time, in the right circumstances, you could take advantage of having horses for courses. This workload should be in this kind of thing, and that is best served by something else.
I gotta jump on that for a second if I could. Alvaro is spot on as always. Just because the cloud can scale doesn't mean your app can scale. You have to engineer that. The apps are not cloud natively, oh, look, I can just add more storage and more compute. And that's not how it works. So your apps have to be aware, and there's skills needed to make them do that. It's not just a set it and forget it kind of thing.
That's great. So when we talk about migrating to the cloud, a lot of clients think, okay, I'm gonna go out and pick a cloud vendor, and now what, right? We've all kind of seen that a little bit here and there. So let's talk about some of the pitfalls or some of the mistakes that are made, and how to overcome those. Alvaro, we'll start with you. What have you seen, and how do clients overcome, maybe some of that stuff of migrating to the cloud?
I'd say, two of the big pitfalls that you see a lot are people want to go and do this, but they haven't been very scientific about actually identifying what it is they're going to move to begin with. So, lots of times IT people are busy, everyone is busy, and you think every detail about an environment. And you find out once you move it is that, oh, there was some interdependency that I didn't know about, and it broke. And then you're in real trouble, So that's one of them, not having enough time put into documenting what it is that you're going to move to begin with and how it's interrelated to each other. Another one, I think that people get bitten by overconfidence, just like me with home improvement, unfortunately. The first time I swing a hammer, I don't realize that I'm in over my head, but it turns out that I have a job that keeps me pretty busy. And so people start a project for like a migration, and they fail to account for the fact that, hey, we were pretty busy before we started to deal with the hardest thing there is, and that's change, right? Those are two really big ones.
That's great. Thomas, anything to add?
Just to add maybe a little bit of context to those comments as well, because we're very much in alignment. I think the biggest thing that we see is planning. We really look at a migration it's 80% planning, and then 10% testing, and then 10% moving data. So we like to brag that, hey, we could move 500, we can migrate 500 VMs over in a weekend. The reality is that it probably took us 8 weeks to plan that project, to make sure that we had all the dependencies and all the DR strategies and all the network IP switchovers and everything. We engaged the the application owners so that we could really communicate with them, to make sure that we understand what the impact of moving that application was. Engaging line of business owners so that when we take their point of sale system down, that they know it. So we have a long list of things that we've seen happen that it really kind of boils down into planning and communication within that organization.
And Brooks, I'll come to you here in a second, but Paul, I'm going to start with you on the same question with regards to migrating. Again, if you get engaged with through Rackspace, and some application makes sense in AWS, another application might make better sense in Azure, might make another different application might make sense on Rackspace Metal. Talk about some of the migration pains, or what you guys do to fix that.
So the biggest problem you can make is thinking you can do it yourself. That's just Daryl Plummer is one of the best analysts, I think, at Gartner. He's great to hear speak. And he said last year, a quote I snagged and I still use, moving to the cloud will take you 2 to 3 years, and you're probably going to screw it up. So you want to get experts that know what they're doing. Planning is a huge part. You got to do a proper assessment to gather the data with which to build your plan upon. Alvaro touched on dependencies. Thomas talked about planning and time frames. The majority is there. So it truly is a long-term effort. You got to figure out the dependencies, where the data, where your users, and then the ability to do a proof of concept might be necessary. We excel at POCs as well as migrations. Prove that it works first before you roll the dice and risk your entire business to a cloud or multiple clouds. You've got to work with experienced vendors. Don't think you can go it alone. Those that do learn the hard way that they probably shouldn't have.
Brooks, anything to chime in on that one?
Just a little flavor here is that, you know, we like to say we're masters of the mundane, and like we said, migration is just boring as crap to people, especially when IT is overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated, and they're getting barked at to move to the cloud from whoever, and they say go, and they want to see movement. There's this natural thing in all of us to just get going and show progress. And like the team here said, man, it's overlooked, the migration aspect of it. So yeah, man, that planning is everything. And I'll say this, this crew, this team of panelists are experts. We do this all the time. And so we can look at it and go, okay, you're going to break everything down in this major phase and then go from there. And I think it was Alvaro said, you know, when you're tackling it yourself, you've done maybe you've never done a migration at all as a CTO or CIO, or maybe you've done one and you remember how painful it is. Just remember there are organizations that do this every single day, and they're experts, and we can break it down into bite-sizable pieces where you can have no downtime and you can be successful and really look like a hero.
Yeah, 100%.
So help us make you be a hero.
That's right. That's why we're here.
Boring until you get sideways, right? That's the thing.
Oh, then it gets nuts, right? Then all of a sudden you're
anymore.
Yeah, no.
So I
like your analogy about building, because I was just out here and I finally took your advice and I hired someone to do it because I suck.
Yeah, there's definitely a time and a place to hire an expert to do it correctly. I was on a panel probably 3 or 4 years ago at a trade show called Data Center World. And they were talking about, you know, migrating or doing data center projects. And someone brought up the point that the average IT professional is a part of 2 or 3 data center projects in their entire career. So if the average career is 30 or 40 years, how in the world do you expect anybody to be an expert in anything that they're doing once every decade or 15 years, right? I mean, that's just completely unfair and candidly ridiculous. And to be honest, that's why there are companies out there that all they do all day, every day is have these conversations with their clients all over the world. So it's a good point. Let's kind of shift the conversation a little bit as we talk about cloud. Eric McVeigh, our global CIO, who has worked for a lot of small companies that you've never heard of, like McKesson, Verizon, Home Depot, always jokes about, you know, having a reason to make a move. Some clients will go dip their toe in cloud with some sort of disaster recovery as a service, or DRAS, for those who know what that acronym means. Others will look at their data center footprint and their gear. And let's just say sometimes if you have 100 cabinets of co-location gear that need to be refreshed in the next year, 2 or 3, that's a pretty sizable bill. Or even for a smaller client, 5 or 8 cabinets that need to be refreshed. So you start to look at other options. What else is out there? What else could I do? A lot of people might move to a SaaS, software as a service-based platform, things like that. When we talk about, again, what we see at Tier 4, a lot of clients will start their cloud journey with some sort of DRAS opportunity or disaster recovery project. So Thomas, I guess we'll start with you on this one. Is disaster recovery always cloud-based? I mean, obviously the answer is no, but you know, how does it work with BAS, RAS, DRAS, et cetera?
Yeah, it's not always cloud-based, but it should. You know, we have clients that, like you said, have 30, 40, 50 racks of infrastructure in a data center that they are replicating to another data center. And you think about that, if you have 30, 40 racks of infrastructure in your primary and your secondary where you're replicating to, many times you have very similar amounts of infrastructure, hugely expensive. really in the last 10 years, there's been sort of this light at the end of the tunnel of building DR solutions that can utilize infrastructure on a pay-as-you-go basis. Basically, when you need that infrastructure because your primary infrastructure has failed, and that's when you start to pay for it. And that's, there may be some caveats to that around, storage being, active costs, but your CPU and RAM costs or your licensing costs are not active. So it can bring your costs way down. So we always recommend trying to figure out how we can get to a cloud-based disaster recovery model. Backup services is probably a little bit different because that is primarily a storage-based tool, and it has a slower RTO and a slower RPO. Where that disaster recovery service, it can be, you can be recovered in seconds for certain kinds of workloads. So it's not always available, the cloud-based DR, but it is definitely an area that can save you a ton of money if you can figure out how to get there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I was part of a conversation a couple weeks ago with a Fortune 500 client, and they were talking about changing their strategy around disaster recovery. And as I started to bring up different points about, what type of software are you going to purchase? Who on your team is going to manage it? What colo are you going to go with? What hardware are you going to buy and use? What type of circuit are you going to go out and purchase? Are you going to have a primary, redundant, tertiary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or, not to sound corny or even like I'm trying to sell the idea really, but, DRAS in a way is almost kind of easy button, right? And if you find the right vendor, the right partner to do a lot of that work, it in some cases is kind of that easy button that a lot of folks and clients are looking for. Brooks, do you have anything else to add in there?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that if you look at IT, and this hasn't changed at all, overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. I mean, it goes back to that. Even if you think you know what you're going to do, who the crap on your team is going to do it if you guys are overworked, right? And that list is never ending. And you're a CIO, and you have to do this. Like, honestly, look at yourself. And it goes back to what Alvaro was saying. Honestly, look and see, do you have the capacity to succeed? I mean, that's the big one, right? So.
The next one, Paul, we're going to start with you. And panelists, please allow me to make a couple audible changes here on our plan because we are coming up close to time. But let's go ahead and talk about the customer concerns about security and compliance and control. How do you address those, Paul? And what have you seen? What have you heard? And how do you overcome those concerns?
So security is a big issue. Most folks aren't prepared for it. It's a dual role responsibility as well. Just like Brooks mentioned compliance earlier. There are cloud providers that are secure and they offer compliance solutions, but compliance is never 100% on one party. There's hosting provider responsibilities, there's customer responsibilities, and there's shared responsibilities. So to be compliant, it's a joint effort. To be secure requires a lot of best practices, cloud native tools, physical tools. Security is not just about computers, though. It's about processes. Are you enforcing strong passwords? Is somebody at your company propping open the data center door every 20 minutes for a smoke break? There's things that we got to do to lock things down. We've got a team of over 400 cybersecurity folks at Rackspace that address every facet from the front end through the back end, through security, through some compliance, et cetera. It's a multifaceted conversation. And again, don't go at it alone. You got to find the right partners that have the skills and the experience in taking care of this. It's a very complex conversation, and you get what you pay for.
Anybody else want to chime in on that one? Alvaro?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to add on, actually, Jake, you made this point before, and that is most people do 1 or 2 or 3 maybe major data center projects in their whole career. Security, in particular, compliance is what it is. You have good habits and you do it well. There's not necessarily a high rate of change there. Security is a whole other ballgame. And in fact, the rate at which service provider people or people who specialize in it can accumulate experience with the rapidly changing pace and the moving target of security is extremely valuable. And it's hard to have that on staff. That's the one thing I would say, to add on. Like, we get the experience at scale. And yeah, right, Paul, you got to find and retain and hire the people and pay them. And the service provider, you get a pretty good hedge against all of that risk.
Yeah, 100%. As we talk more and more about this term dynamic workforce, right? Historically, if I needed a DBA, whether that was for 3 hours a day or 13 hours a day, I had to go out and hire a DBA. Well, now this dynamic workforce concept is becoming more and more mainstream, whether it's a small, medium-sized client or a large enterprise client. And a lot of the vendors, candidly, are being able to give mentally stimulating work to their employees, which allows them to retain that talent better than an end user would ever be able to do so. Not to sound ridiculous here, but that's just a fact. And candidly, probably pay them better as well. So, it's the proverbial, if you can't beat them, join them type of conversation, where sometimes it just makes more sense, instead of fighting the trend, to, adopt some of these more mainstream ideas and go forward strategies. Again, guys, we're running up against time. This is a conversation we could have. It could be a 3 or 4 hour conversation, but I don't think any of the attendees have 3 or 4 hours today to do that, nor do you. But let's go ahead and jump down to, let's talk about managed services for a second. So talking about that dynamic workforce understanding, let's talk about maybe rapid fire. Brooks, we'll start with you, and then Alvaro, Thomas, and Paul. Why don't you guys talk about the managed services that you offer, maybe some key differentiators that if any of these attendees here that they might be interested in furthering a conversation with you about. Brooks, I'll start with you, maybe 30, 45 seconds.
So I'm going to start off on the things that might be a little unique for us, as opposed to some of the others on the panel here. But for us, it's we offer kind of a compliance as a service, and it's really more preparatory for that auditing that has to take place, because what was spoken about was security and compliance is what makes hybrid or multi-cloud more complex. You have different people involved, and now you have to dig a little bit deeper. Very doable. It's just important to make sure you understand what you're getting into with compliance and security. And that's one of the unique kind of offerings about us, is this compliance as a service, where we go through that stack, in addition to, managed infrastructure 24/7 NOCs, managed security, all that stuff that the other guys are going to talk about. But I'd say is fairly unique about us, Jake. Within 30 seconds, I'd say.
That's good. Timer. Alvaro, 30 or 45 seconds. Talk about high level Tierpoint, couple key differentiators for you.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that some of the things that are key for us are having facilities where you need them to be able to deliver on hybrid, ranging from colo through hyperscale. Within that, though, we've had very tremendous success with people who want hosted private clouds. We're doing them on both VMware VxRail platforms and managed or unmanaged Nutanix. So people who want to have the ability to chart a course or to start in one place and finish in another around that, we do that with great success. And then finally, I think that something that's really unique about us is the ability as well among this group to offer services for production, HA or DR, for IBM-centric workloads, be they on I, P, or Z infrastructure.
Excellent. Thomas, you're next up on that one.
So as we have a long history as a managed service provider. I think where, and we cover kind of all the same aspects, the patching, the monitoring, the notification, the proactive support models. I think really an area that we are really adjusting into this multi-cloud world is really around governance. And I'm really talking about, keeping costs down for our customers, helping them identify how they're spending their cloud dollars, how they can actually reduce that cost, and then providing some tactics around things like tagging and security, so to make it a more trackable and manageable environment.
And Paul, last but not least, Rackspace. You want to talk through that one a little bit?
There we go, find the mute button. So basically, echoing what these guys have said, Rackspace excels at providing guidance around design, deploy, and support of all things public cloud, all things private cloud, and all things multi-cloud. It's a multi-cloud world right now. So we figure out where should your workload be based on a lot of things other than technology. The cloud's for everyone, but not everything. We help customers of all sizes, from SMB through enterprise, figure out where their home needs to be. Then we can then migrate them into it. support it on day 2 with the best support in the world, and then figure out where they need to be done in the future. It's hard to be experts on your own. You got to find a Sherpa, someone to help you, and all of us here are in that category.
Absolutely. And I see Joel joining here, so we're going to get the hook in just a minute. I'll go ahead and finish with this last question about successful cloud implementations. So we'll limit that to a 45-second or so answer. Without mentioning client names or any sort of IP, Paul, we'll start with you on what you've seen with maybe a partnership win between Rackspace and Tier4.
Yeah, we had a great win. Back in middle of last year, there was a major credit card company that got compromised, not our customer, but that compromise caused lots of other folks in that sector to get scared about cloud. We had a customer, an existing client, that was thinking about leaving and taking it in-house, which is the exact opposite way to think. Part of our problem was that a customer had lost track of what we do because of our portfolio changes over time. So we had to refresh them as to what we do and then educate them as to how the market has changed. They are about 3 years behind. Think about this real quick. Amazon today has over 40,000 SKUs. It's hard for your teams to keep up with that stuff, and that's just one vendor. So we've got to help our customers understand what we as service providers do every day, educate them, and then keep them current.
Perfect. And Brooks, we also had a client, mutual client win. 45 seconds or so. You want to speak to that high level without mentioning client names or any sort of IP?
This was the federal government. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to say their name. Sorry about that. Just kidding. Litigation support firm, fast growth, scaling quickly to this day, had no cloud strategy, really was still stuck in their own building a facility in California with brownouts and all the junk they had to deal with there. So we really helped them to come in kind of from a brick and mortar style and do what we said, migrate and do all these things that we were talking about and get them going to now where they're able to acquire organizations and bring people on within weeks and scale the infrastructure, very quickly. But we nailed that. Good job, Tier4. Lume.
Good teamwork on that. Thomas, we have a win here in the last 4 or 5 months. High level, without any client information. You want to speak to that for a second? You're on mute, by the way. Thomas, you're on mute.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Data analytics company out of the Southeast really they were already deployed in the cloud, but they were having some real challenges with service support, performance, etc. We were able to assess the environment, provide a migration, reduce some cost, and layer on a lot deeper and did security services, firewall, SIM services, management, disaster recovery, BAS, or that full gambit of services, zero downtime and no service interruption during that migration as well.
Awesome. Alvaro, we'll go ahead and finish up with you if you want to talk about a win that we had with Tierpoint, mutual client that decided Tierpoint was the right fit.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the one that that I would mention was actually a healthcare SaaS provider based in the Southeast. And they were a pretty great illustration of this, actually, because coming into the engagement, they were in a data center co-location provider's facility, a different company. But I think that they kind of reached the realization that working in healthcare and SaaS, these are two areas where expertise at the intersection of their business and the technology was super important. So to be able to get more on that front out of their people, they actually went from being a colo customer or someone else to a hosted private cloud customer with Tierpoint out of one of our facilities, and then using multi-tenant disaster recovery as a service facilities out of another to shape up the cost of what they were doing. We had just the connectivity for replication between it. The net effect for them, though, was the people that were on staff could focus on innovation and focus on advancing what they were doing. They didn't have to focus on keeping the lights on and, what color is the light on my drive and stuff like that. It was, I think, very successful transition from someone running their own infrastructure to doing it for prod and DR with us. And it's continued to grow over time because company gets bigger, the customer gets bigger. It's been a great success for everybody.
Absolutely. And in closing, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that these clients, all 4 of them that we're referencing in this conversation, came to Tier 4 with the desire to understand better what vendors do what out there in the vendor universe. Again, the average IT professional is doing 2 to 3 data center projects in their entire career. It is absolutely unfair to expect yourself or someone else to be an expert in something that you're doing every 10 to 15 years. So with that said, again, with our database, our expertise, the team of folks that we have, if you have a project, whether it's data center, cloud, DRaaS, what have you related, feel free to call Tier 4. We can help you with a lot of different things in that regard. And candidly, not only help you understand what vendors do what, but shrink the timelines down from what would probably be months or even year plus down to, in some cases, clients need to move days or weeks. And again, that's why we're here. Shameless plug, that was it. Joel, I'm going to turn it over to you. Paul, Thomas, Alvaro, Brooks, couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much. The attendees, I'm looking here at the list. We got quite the list. Appreciate everybody joining from around the world. I'll go ahead and sign off. Joel, go ahead and close it out.
See y'all. Thanks.
Thanks, Jake. And also to our panelists. Please join us next week for mobile device management and cellular spend optimization, 2 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday, June 24th. We'll see you all then. Again, thank you to our panel. The contact information along with a replay of this will be distributed. And again, this could be a second or third part, series that we have. So we may have you guys back on here. Anyway, thanks to all who joined us. We'll talk to you soon.